Saturday marks World Cancer Day. It is a global initiative that began in the year 2000. This year's theme is Close the Care Gap. The focus is on preventing death from cancer and making sure that access to treatment and care is equitable for everyone around the world. Well, Dr. Tony Mark joins me now. He's the chairman of the Department of Clinical Oncology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Good morning to you, Dr. Tony Mark.
Good morning. Hello. Nice meeting you.
Good to meet you. Thank you so much for being on the show. I want to start by sort of pointing out that cancer is the leading cause of death in China. So how is the government addressing this, especially when it comes to cancer awareness?
Right. So cancer actually continues the major cause of death in China. Particularly, the highest incident is actually the lung cancer, followed by colorectal cancer, liver cancer, and breast cancer. Now, so actually, China had made a major move over the year, especially on the early detection, including screening for lung cancer and monitoring for patients with hepatitis B for liver cancer and mammography for breast cancer. So there have been a lot of front and actually finances spent on the prevention. And then in terms of treatment, China had multiple new pharmaceutical companies that come out that is actually focusing on anti-cancer drug over the past 5 to 10 years. And they're actually relatively successful with a compound that is actually similar to the international compound, but the cost is actually much lower. So with the development and the know-how, I'm quite sure the innovation arm will come in the future.
So a two-pronged approach, right? Prevention and treatment. Earlier you mentioned lung cancer being the leading cause of death. Tied to this, of course, is cigarette smoking, which is still relatively widespread in China. Why is that, despite the government's continued anti-smoking efforts, do you think?
Well, for two reasons, actually, the high incidence in lung cancer. Regarding to tobacco is the fact that China is actually one of the major production country of tobacco. So in a way is that economically, they actually rely on this industry quite a bit. So that's one factor. But then on the other hand, being Asian, there's also a high incidence of non-smoking related cancer. Approximately 30% of lung cancer are actually not related to tobacco. And they are actually related to a number of genetic mutations, including something called a EGFR mutation, ALK, and all those are actually being so-called a target for the molecular target therapy these days.
Really interesting. Now, Doctor, research is showing that the rates of certain kinds of cancer, such as stomach cancer, liver, esophageal, are decreasing in China. What is accounting for this?
Right. So I think there's a couple of potential explanations. One is actually the food that we're eating is actually of much better quality this day. Preserved food actually have been known to be associated with the incidence of gastric cancer in the past. And we observed that in Korea, Japan, and also in China. But I think overall, all these countries, now we have much better preservation of food these days. So I think that's one contributing factor. Second is actually early diagnosis. I mean, in a sense, is that gastroscopy screening is actually become more preferred. And actually, we were able to find the early stage cancer and make it curative over the past decades or two.
I see. Now, Doctor, this year's World Cancer Day theme is Close the Care Gap. How is China ensuring that there is equitable care and treatment for cancer patients?
Now, this is actually a very interesting question. China is actually making great effort to have a drug being available to the population from two angles. Number one is that actually they bargain with the multinational country to make sure the cost that's actually being made available to China is lower. So indeed, for some of the target therapy actually is about 1/3 the cost in China comparing to the other countries. That is for international drugs. But then on the other hand, as I said, that they actually are producing quite a number of so-called Me Too drug, very similar to the international targeted therapy, but then the cost of production and then the cost to being available to the population is also much lower.
Dr. Tony Mark is the chairman of the Department of Clinical Oncology at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. We thank you so much for your informative and illuminating interview.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.